Well, welcome back. We are on episode 13. Of course, in the previous episode, this is a part two of episode 12. So we have been talking about religion and evolutionism, and we're going to get into how we think the world and everything began, and a little bit of fun conversations and everywhere in between. So I think that it's been super interesting so far, and I've loved our time with Rachel and Josie.
Yep.
And so I think that the second parter is going to be great, and I really hope that you guys are enjoying, and I hope that you guys are taking some tidbits and information from everything that we've been talking about. And I hope that it helps form your opinions, and also just realize that you guys, it's okay to have your own opinion. You don't have to have the same as your best friends. We've been doing great, and it's been awesome and so much fun. And personally, I think that this is one of, if not like my favorite episodes that we've had. It's been really good.
Yeah, get ready for your guys' gears to turn, because our faces in this episode, we kind of are just stunned, and we were really thinking about some things. So buckle up and let's dive right back in, right where we left off with Josie and Rachel.
Yep.
I think that kind of leads me, Chris, that I think bringing up the idea of like the once saved, always saved versus the rolling basis, right? I think that comes down to this really core question that I think I would pose to you guys, which would be like, this idea of like life after death. I don't know about y'all, but I'm terrified of the whole kind of concept. And I find that a lot of times that's religion is kind of used to ease that. And I think that that's huge, whatever your religion is, right? And so, I don't know, I guess it's kind of like, what's everyone's take on just like life after death and a higher power, or not a higher power, or like how religion or not having religion helps you navigate those waters?
Yeah.
Anyone?
I'm smiling because I don't have like a super. That's fantastic. That's how it's done. I'm smiling because I don't know that I necessarily have a specific belief in the afterlife. I've had conversations with Christopher where I'm like, if I end up in heaven, if that's where we all end up going. So I as a person, I think that 10 years ago, I would have been like, there's a heaven and a hell kind of thing, just as the basic rolling. But now I'm like, I don't think that the hell and the heaven and these different scapes of where people and their souls are going are necessarily what I would personally believe in. I think that wherever we do end up, I think that we'll either, I think for me, it's going to sound kind of morbid and black and white. I think we're either just going to rot in the ground and we've lived our lives and that's that, and there's nothing else to it, or our souls will go to somewhere else, whatever you want to call that place, and that I'll be able to see my grandma and stuff like that. And me personally, I hope that if there's the second option where our souls do go somewhere, I hope that it has a big, beautiful simulator. I have this dream. I just want to see how the world would turn out if John Bonet's killer was caught right away. I want to see how things would play out if Hitler had never been born. So for me, I guess I just don't, I think a couple years ago I would have said that I was afraid of death in the afterlife, but I think the fact that I don't know what's coming next and I'm not firm in it somehow is more comforting, in the sense that I'm like, well, whatever happens, happens, and this is what I can hope for, but at the end of the day, we're just not gonna know. And so I'm sort of weirdly optimistic about it, in the sense of I'm either going to be dirt in the ground, or I guess my belief would be I'm either going to be dirt in the ground, or I'm going to get to be reunited with the people that love me. And hopefully there's a giant world simulator that I get to play with all day long and see how life would be and get all of my questions answered on things like that. So
in a perfect world.
In a perfect world. Yeah. Right.
Yeah. Well, I have a very similar belief to that too. My belief is there has to be something after this. There has to be. There's no way that this is it, is the way that I think about it. And I definitely believe in reincarnation, and I believe that your souls keep going forward, like Rachel said. I used to think that reincarnation was the like stupidest thing ever. Like I was like walking my pig one time and a cardinal like came up really close to me and my mom was like, "Oh, that has to be your Uncle Zeke. Like he loved cardinals." And I was like, "What the hell, lady? Like that makes no sense." Like I was like, "Okay, mom." But now actually like kind of paying attention to that and like just I think that's where like my whole universe part comes into play. I mean, life has to keep going. So I definitely believe that like I'm either going to be reincarnated into a butterfly or my life is going to continue on, just not in this body. And I'm going to be reborn and start over and my soul is going to keep going.
I have a question really quick. I'm just curious, Colleen, when you say that your soul keeps going, do you think that like you as your soul is conscious of what has been in the past? Like, I'm not trying to say that like butterflies have a consciousness to them, but like the soul, if you were reincarnated into a butterfly, do you think you'd know? Or do you sort of believe that like it's like that kind of like natural cycle of things and you wouldn't really be like aware, I guess. And do you think that you'd be like an aware soul as you get reincarnated?
I think, yeah. I think a little, that is a really good question. I think a little bit. I mean, I think the hardest part would be finding out my purpose then. You know, I feel like I have found out my purpose as a human, but then what's my purpose as a butterfly? and why am I a butterfly? Like, I would like to think I'm going to be like a cheetah or something. Make it something cool. But I think I would have some awareness. I feel like my internal thoughts are just going to keep going. I think that's the thing that's going to stick with you is your internal thoughts are just that roller coaster doesn't stop. So yeah, like I almost imagine it kind of being like a cartoon and like, you know, dying and going through that whole thing and then being reincarnated and my internal thoughts being like, now what the hell are we doing? What's going on? Like, what is this? Oh, I have 4 legs now. So that's how I imagine it because it makes me laugh and it sounds enjoyable. Yeah.
Colleen, you can't say that because every time I hit a bug with my car, I'm gonna feel really bad.
You were a person.
I'm gonna be like that with Mother Teresa. She knows. Oh, that's not a good example. She was a very good person, but you understand the point.
I didn't really think about it like that. That is sad.
I'm like, oh.
Well then, yeah. Then I guess the question. Then I guess the question is after that. Then do you get reincarnated into something else? Does it just keep going? Is that the circle of life?
Isn't it like oh man, it's been a long time since I took this class, so bear with me because I'm probably wrong, but isn't it I want to say it's Buddhism, which obviously believes in reincarnation, where you essentially continue to be reincarnated in one form or another until you reach, what is it called, you're like the ultimate form of yourself, and where basically you get reincarnated until you reach that, can't remember what's called, and it's all based off of the guy who just sat under the tree until he reached that part of himself, and that's like kind of their whole like part of the doctrine, right? I think about that all the time. I'm like, that's so stressful. Can you imagine? Just like every time they're like, you're a little bug, and then you're like, I hope this is it, and then it's my highest self.
No, I know what you're talking about, but yeah, it's like pretty much, I don't remember the word either, but yeah, it's pretty much essentially like the ultimate best version of yourself. That's where you stop, which is also very interesting.
Right? I think that concept is insane. I think, the idea of Buddhism overall with all of that is like so interesting and so cool. So
I would say that I have more of a conservative approach. I do believe that there is a heaven and a hell, and there's a right way to live your life, and as long as you live it the correct way, then you're going to go to heaven, and if you don't, then good luck to you. But I definitely, one thing especially with that is a lot of times in Christianity and within religion, you hear God is coming back. And when he does come back, he's going to gather his children, and you're going to go walk the trail, and you're going to meet him at the gates, and you're going to have your day and time to talk to the Lord and figure out if you lived life right and wrong. And that is scary for me as someone that does believe that. And
I think that especially a lot recently especially since like the US got super close to having a war with like North Korea and Russia and stuff like that. And there is, in the Bible, there are signs saying that there are going to be certain times when something happens and he's gonna appear. And so there's just been, especially like within wars and different like, I don't know, just like not peaceful times here on Earth, that it really scares me to know, like, is God coming back soon? Is this going to happen soon? Because I am not prepared for that. And also just, especially with like a lot of the conflict that's been going on in Israel and in the Middle East and things like that, that is obviously also scary because that is the Holy Land. And so that's how I view things. So.
Well, and that was bringing that up. That's like a big reason of like why I never really went down the religion path. Because the big thing for me, I mean, I don't understand how, God's supposed to love everybody and forgive everybody, right? And he's supposed to want the best for me. Then why are there rapists in the world? Why are there killers? Why did COVID happen that killed hundreds of thousands of people? That's the part of it that I have never understood. And maybe that's because I didn't grow up going to church. Maybe that's because I don't have that deep of a background into it. But I never understood how I could follow this person that lets such terrible things happen.
Yeah, I totally agree, Colleen. I think that that's one of my constant questions and sort of hang up on continuing a further journey with God and a Christian faith, is that like I just don't understand how we can have so much strife and negativity in a world that is supposed to be like with a God that's supposed to be like all knowing and all benevolent. And it just kind of like, if he's not both of them, then like he's not as all powerful as he seems. But how can he be both of them and still let the horrible things that do happen on this earth happen? And so yeah, I think for me that's always been one of my big hangups. And I do think it's interesting because I was listening to you talk, Chris, and you were like, I'm not prepared for that day. And I think it's so interesting, that difference in how like you are so deep in your faith and believe in me, someone who is not, because I just kept thinking like, if God showed up right now in the background, I'd be like, we got some stuff to talk about. And for me, personally, I would feel like, if this is your world, why would you make it so easy for someone like me to not believe? Like, because I do think that skepticism is healthy, but like there's a difference between questioning your faith as you grow and having a world in which it's so, in my opinion, so easy to not believe. And so I'm with you. I think that those are like some of those big questions where I just get really hung up on it. And I'm like, I can't take that plunge, because those are things that don't feel like they'll get answered until I am dead and we are in the afterlife of whatever that looks like. And I think that also wraps into the fact that like, if we go by the standard of a lot of different like denominations of Christianity, I could be on my deathbed in a hospital, ask for a priest, and be baptized 10 minutes before I die. And theoretically, I'm good. My sins are gone. And so those kinds of all things are where I just get very hung up on it. And it's one of those things where I feel I like to tread lightly, because I never want to offend anybody in their faith, especially within their own walk, because that is such an individual experience. But for me, those are the big blockers for me. And sometimes I think to myself, like, maybe if I was taking the walk, I'd understand, but it's just hard to feel. It feels a lot like you're trying to step onto a path that hasn't been paved, because it is so individual. And it's like, it's a big thing to just want to take through the woods when I'm on like a concrete path through downtown Arlington. So, but I think that that's all part of the bigger conversation of religion and why it is so multifaceted. So,
well, like, yeah, like elaborating on that is like, I love having these conversations, and like, that's something that's gotten so frustrating to me, is like, I want to understand so badly. Like I want to know what it feels like when Josie goes to church and when she prays, and like what am I missing something? Like I tried the whole, like, if you look at my Bible, it is highlighted, it is sticker noted, it is colorful, because I so badly wanted to understand. But then I tried having conversations with God. I tried having a walk with him. I tried believing. I tried praying, and I heard nothing. So that's why for me, it was easier for me to take the spiritual route and, pray to my ancestors and pray to my spirit angels, because those are people that I knew. Those are people that I knew their beliefs, I knew their thinking, I knew what they followed. And I would like to think that they would want the best for me with, being a part of their descendant. So like that's why it's easier for me to follow that.
I think this is also, and I love these conversations so much, you guys. I just like want to put that out there. I am like so value these conversations. These are so cool. They're so cool and they're so important. I think for me, like, I guess to circle back to like the whole like life, death, whatever thing, I think that it's weird because my Christianity has been very much not based around this idea of like proving myself to the Lord so that I make it to the other side. And I think a lot of that's just because of my lived experience. And so like when I, just to speak completely candidly, like the reason I was completely atheist, completely whatever, that whole thing. And then like I had attempted suicide, and that was what started this whole thing for me. And so I think, ironically enough, based off of that experience, I realized that as important as salvation, because I guess that's really what it comes down to here from the Christian mindset, right? As important as salvation is to the Christian church, my day in, day out relationship with the Lord and the way that impacts the person that I am today, the way I interact with other people, the things that I do is the most important thing to me. And what I sometimes, oh man, I have so many thoughts right now. But I think something that's really hard, and I think it's hard to have these conversations within the Christian church sometimes, is at the end of the day. So let's like, I think that the belief I subscribe to is like the idea of like a Christian like heaven, but I need to really do more like looking, because the idea of like the rapture and everything, I think that so much of the Bible is subjective to like parables and other things like that. I'd like to do more looking into like the context in which like Revelation was written so I can understand it more. And that's something that's a gap in my own understanding. So I really don't want to speak to that as much. But what I have a hard time believing, but then also can believe, is that at the end of the day, the most important thing to the Lord in that sense, and with this salvation lens, is going to be that you believed in God and you committed your life to God, right? So that's kind of what salvation looks like from a like 5,000 foot level. But what that also looks like is loving other people and doing and treating other people the best you can and treating yourself the best you can and doing these things while you're on earth. And so it's like, for me, my initial thought when we began this conversation was like, well, I think at the end of the day, like God's going to care most about how I treated other people and the life that I lived here on earth and all of those things. And then I was like, but like, I know there's the Christian doctrine. It's just that like, oh, well, did you believe in me? And I'm like, well, I guess those things are really, if you're following the Christian mindset, are supposed to be one and the same. Clearly, oftentimes are not. And a lot of the people, like a lot of the Christians that we have now. And so I think that's really interesting. And I find myself time and time again coming back to this idea of like, what is being a follower of Christ as like the Lord intended, and what's been subjected to free will. And so I think, man, so many hard conversations. I think that part of like, there's such horrible things that happen in the world, and when you're supposed to have this Lord that's omnipotent and omnipotent and all of these things, you're like, how are you going to say you're all of these things, and then you're going to let people get sick, and you're going to let these horrible things happen and everything. And I think that the way that I don't want to say come to terms with that, because I don't know if that's necessarily the case either, because I find myself quite often struggling with that. But I do take solace in this idea, knowing that we have free will in our lives, and like these horrible things, man, it's such like a huge like layout that it's so hard to condense into words without feeling like I'm saying the wrong thing. Because I don't want to say like well, God lets bad things happen to you so that you come to him, because you're like, whoa, okay, that's no, like, no, let's not have that. But it's like a cycle of like in my own life, horrible things happen to me, and that was ended up in me finding the Lord, which really made me into the best version of not the best version, but a better version of myself than I was before, which then made me a better person on earth. And I think overall makes the world better because I found the Lord. And it's so multifaceted, and I think it's so hard to not have the answers. But one thing I find solace in Christianity is, like, I'm going to treat other people to the best of my ability, and I'm going to make a lot of mistakes. And I'm going to do all of these things to the best of my ability, and I'm going to make a lot of mistakes. But at the end of the day, if I can lay my head down knowing that I tried my best, I did all of these things, I loved people to the best of my ability. I didn't hold them to doctrine. I didn't hold them to these things, because I think more times than not, and the more we learn about like the academia behind the Bible, it's really crap to be like, oh, the Bible is like this exact thing means this exact thing. You're like, well, I don't know. That's again, a whole other conversation. But if I can be a better person and treat other people better because of that, I take solace in that, and I take solace in knowing it's potentially part of like a greater scheme. Like, I think that I find Christianity to be incredibly compatible with science and everything. I think when people have conversations about like evolution or things like that, I'm like, you're telling me that this happened in this specific of a way to get us to where we are now. We started with rocks and water, and now we have Bluetooth. And you're telling me that there wasn't some higher power involved in that happening? I don't know about that one. I was like, so I think that all of these things are far more compatible. And I think, I don't know, Colleen talked about like crystals earlier and stuff. And I'm like, in a lot of ways, I think that I find that to be very compatible with Christianity, where I'm like, how can you believe in a Lord? And again, this is just me speaking for myself, and I know a lot of people don't agree, and that's totally fine. But in my own journey, I've found that to be very compatible, where I'm like, I can't believe in a Lord who created all of these things, and if that's the doctrine I'm believing in, then how am I supposed to believe that those things can't have some like other like significance in our lives as well? And I think that I find Christianity to be much more fluid than I think a lot of people have interpreted to be. And that's really hard sometimes, because I'm like, I think there's a lot more wiggle room here, and there's a lot more, like, it's a lot more open than people realize it is. And it really boils down. I mean, guys, like, New Testament's got 2 commandments. It's like to love the Lord your God with all your heart, mind, soul, and strength, and to love thy neighbor as thyself. Period. Those are the only 2 commandments in the entire New Testament. Like, that's the idea, and that's what we're supposed to be going back to, is, and the idea of loving the Lord with everything you have means that's supposed to translate into loving your neighbor and loving other people and taking care of the world and all of those things. And I don't know, I think I have so many questions, and there's a lot of things that still don't make sense to me. And I think that that's part of my personal religious journey, is like, I don't want to say coming to terms with them, because that would imply that I'm not necessarily like trying to figure them out, because I am. But just accepting the fact that like there's going to be issues, and that's okay. I'm going to deal with that, and I'm going to have doubts sometimes. And I always told the girls when I led a Bible study, I was like, and they didn't like this very much, but I was like, if you have doubts and you do some serious, I'm like sit down and like do research and do these things and look at the academic and look at the historic and look at all of these things. And I was like, if your faith doesn't stand up to that, then there's other questions that we need to acknowledge here, because that's kind of where I found myself. And I'm very, I think, academic when I look at a lot of things associated with my faith, and that's been really helpful to me, is to not run from these fears, not run from these doubts. And I think that anyone that preaches that having doubts in the Christian doctrine is unhealthy is wrong, because I'm like, well, you're going to, because if your doctrine is that there's this power that's so much more knowing and so much more everything that you could ever be, then how can you ever say that having doubts is wrong? You're just supposed to take it at face value and that everything should make sense. That doesn't make sense to me. So a lot of thoughts.
I love that. Everything you said, I think it's really beautiful. And I think it stands, like, that's the kind of Christianity that I could follow, honestly, what you said. Like, that's the kind of thing that I can get behind, because I think that it has so much room for the fact that we're humans, that we're human beings, and we stumble and we question. And I think that so many of the times they don't, like you said, like if you have doubt, it's not welcomed in so many of those spaces, but I think that's so part of who we are as a creation, as a species. So I think that it was really beautiful what you said. I also do want to loop back on the evolution thing, because that has become my new favorite thing to
we'll loop back on
around
that later. But
Yeah.
I also wanted to add in, like, I completely agree with what Josie said, and I thought it was also beautiful. And something that, like, it even goes into show, kind of like what we talked about a little earlier, with the church is changing with the different generations that are going through that. And so a church like what, similar to, I mean, Josie and I have different beliefs, but overall we have a lot of similar beliefs. And so like a church that's more like that is more accepting to a lot of things that we've witnessed, like a lot of us that grew up in church saw. And so I think that that's really important. And I loved like what Rachel said with it's more accepting and more open to what's going on. And we are humans, and it's okay to be human, obviously. And so you're just learning by every step. And that's a big thing that we've been hearing today is we're all learning to know better and to grow as a person with whatever religion, spiritual upbringings or beliefs that we have. And honestly, that's what's important.
Okay, so Christopher and I are sitting on the couch one night playing Mario Kart, and I don't really know how the conversation got where it was. So I just kind of look at him one day and I'm like, do you believe in the evolutionary process? Like, how do you feel about Darwinism and stuff like that? And we jumped into it. And so now it's become my favorite question when talking about religion to ask, because I feel like it's one that doesn't get asked, but it is so interesting to just like wonder how, like, what people's opinion is on that, because I think I know where Josie's is going to go based on what we talked about before. But because like I do believe in evolution, I don't necessarily think that we came from an Adam and an Eve and humanity procreated from that. I think that there was an evolutionary process and that Neanderthals are kind of where we came from and stuff like that. So I'm curious what everyone else's opinion is on that, and do you believe in it? Who wants to start?
Well, I'll go because Rachel already knows my opinion.
Chris, I don't think I know your opinion on this.
I don't believe. I believe in evolution, that like things and humans can evolve, because I think that we have evolved since the beginning of time, so I do believe in Adam and Eve. And so I think that we have evolved since then in different kind of ways. But overall, like in a sense, I don't believe that we came from Neanderthals. And I mean, I'm sure that there were Neanderthals at one point in time or something, but I don't know. I don't believe that we came from apes. I don't believe like that kind of stuff. I also believe that species and animals and different things like that can also evolve in a sense, because like we've seen that, like we've seen it in the ocean, we've seen it on land. But overall, like, I don't know, because it's also like has had my brain gears a going since I've had this conversation with Rachel, because like she's been like, well, have you thought about this? Like, have you thought about, I don't know what your examples were. I don't remember what your examples
I remember
were.
it if you want me to tell you.
Yeah, tell me.
So there's this bird that so there's an island off of the coast, the Pacific side coast. I don't remember which country it is. I'd have to look it up. South America, and there is this bird species that lives on the mainland. And a long time ago, part of that species migrated to this little island. And when they moved to the island, they completely like evolved differently. So they're no longer sisters, they're cousins. And then all of those birds on the island died off. Yeah, they were gone. They were clinically extinct, whatever it's called. And then recently, in modern times, the birds did the exact same thing, where a small group of them tore off, went to this island, and have evolved to be the same bird that they were thousands of years ago. And so I think, right, like that,
Mind blown.
it's so crazy to think it's such a modern full-on example of the evolutionary process, and so it's an interesting topic how they go into like religion and evolution.
Yeah. But yeah, so like I think that like people and animals and species and stuff can evolve and stuff, like in an overall sense. Like I don't believe in Darwinism, and I believe like there was an Adam and Eve and we have a creator. I think Josie touched on it earlier. Like, how in the heck do you think all of this came if there wasn't some kind of higher power that was, you know, pulling little strings upstairs kind of thing? But yeah, that's my take.
Well, you're like, I think Rachel and I talked about this. Like, you're one of the like very few people, if not the only person that I know that like full on believes in Adam and Eve. Like, through and through.
I know that's like everyone. I know lots of people who are in that like camp, specifically kind of with like the area my husband's from.
Well, yeah. Because he's from like
northwestern Ohio.
Yeah.
I was just thinking, I have so many feelings. I have so many feelings about evolution and religion. To preface this, both of my parents are biologists by trade. Like, that is what they do. So I don't want to like take that out of it and everything. And then I think honestly, the like conversation about evolution was one of the hardest ones for me when I first like accepted Christ and like started believing and everything like that. I had a really hard time with that until I started began my like academic career. And so there's this idea of intelligent design, right? And so that's where I don't want to say I fall in the camp of intelligent design, because there's other things in that camp that I don't necessarily agree with. However, I think so majority of the Old Testament, the way that they would write and communicate stories and things like that was oftentimes through parables. That was the number one way that they communicated all of these things, right? And so, and even like there's a lot of holes that people like poke through Genesis and everything. So you can take Genesis chapter 1, Genesis chapter 2, for example, where Genesis chapter 1 goes through what everyone kind of thinks is this like origin story and everything. That's what everyone thinks of when they think about creationism and this conversation. And then you get into the exact same story, but then all of a sudden, so in like the first one, it doesn't really talk about like the creation of man and like Adam and Eve at all. But then you get into Exodus chapter 2, and it all of a sudden tells the exact same story. But then there's this huge like segment in the middle that's going over like, you know, the plucking of the rib and things like that. And so I am in the camp of, I think that, and we know that a lot of Old Testament writers and scholars utilize parables to tell these stories. And so I very much think that time is relative, and we see that being a recurring theme in the Old Testament, where like timelines are kind of fluid, kind of like, I just want to say like kind of weird and over exaggerated and all of these things. A very, very common recurring theme that we see in the Old Testament. And so in my opinion, and again, just my opinion, I feel like I have to preface all of that with this, and this is just what makes the most sense to my brain, is that I think we're more in the like intelligent design line of thinking, where I'm like, do I think that God created all of these things, did all of these things, all of that kind of stuff? Absolutely. I think that for everything to line up for the Big Bang Theory to be a thing, like I feel so strongly that that is such a like cosmic, incredible, higher power event to have happened. Because I mean, like, you just look at all the science that goes into that, and I'm like, the fact that that happened is insane. Like, if that was the creation of our universe with the Big Bang Theory, that is the most insane, like the chance of that happening is so minimal. And so I feel very strongly that like the Lord orchestrates all of these things and orchestrates evolution and all of this different stuff. And I think that there's so much science to back all of that up. And I believe very, very strongly in all of that science and everything. And I think I personally see Adam and Eve as like and this is just, again, what makes the most sense to my brain to align with like the science that I know, coming from the background that I have in the life that I live now. And I could totally be wrong, because I do think that also God is, if you believe that you haven't like believe that, but I think Adam and Eve was used as a like example more than anything to basically showcase human nature and showcase at a really kind of like simplistic way where sin comes from, and this kind of idea of like strain and all of those things. So that's kind of where I could talk about like the biology behind evolution all day from like the science perspective. I think it's so interesting, it's so fascinating, and taking it from like literally from the like one-celled organism all the way up to like humanity as we know it now. I think it's so cool. I think it's so cool. We can trace so much that we like have all of this. And I don't want to discount the idea that like, I mean, yeah, if you believe in an all-powerful God, then like really anything's possible at that point. And so, but like what makes the most sense to me is this like intelligent design theory. So I think evolution's so interesting in all of that. I'm like fascinated by it.
Mm-hmm.
I'm with you. I think it's so interesting.
Yeah.
I have a follow-up question, but I want Colleen, I feel like if you want to jump in with your answer.
Okay, so I have a completely different perspective from everybody. I believe a lot in the universe. I think the universe is extremely powerful, just as powerful, if not more powerful than God. And I think that a lot of the things that God has created, he had to have the universe be that powerful to create those things. And I don't believe in Adam and Eve. It just, my mind cannot just like come around the fact of like all of a sudden God just created two people and was like, here you go. But I do think it's very interesting to think about if it was true, like what was going through their thoughts. Like it had to be wild that they were like the only people on Earth. But no, I believe that everything comes from something. Especially like if you look at other planets, I mean, a lot of them, like some of them are just dust, but they have creatures on them that had to come from somewhere. So I definitely believe in evolution. I definitely think in Darwinism, like especially the whole like caveman thing. Like I feel like that was such a middle like point of Darwinism. So I think it's really interesting too. And I think there's so many different viewpoints that you could take on it. But yeah, that's my thoughts.
Yeah, I'm with you. So interesting. And it's interesting that you say other planets, because that's where I was going to go next, is the like life beyond our planet and everything. The idea that God was so wholly involved in the creation of our planet and our world and life on Earth, how do you then feel about that expanding into a universe that feels endless? I do believe that there is other life out there. Probably don't look anything like the aliens that we think of that are in blockbuster movies, but I do believe that there is life out there in other places, and that there are planets that are incredibly similar to ours, that are aligned just right within solar systems and stuff. So I'm curious to know what your guys' opinions are, taking it that step further beyond our planet.
Okay, I'll go since I just talked about it. So I definitely believe there has to be. Like, there's no way that we were the chosen ones and that Earth was like the chosen perfect ecosystem for us to have life. I think that there is other life. It's just we don't know about it, because if the government told us that there was other life, we would just freak out because we wouldn't know what to do with it. It's so new. We know nothing about it. And I think a big thing, like, didn't they just find like water on Mars for the first time? Like, what? Like, a planet needs water to survive. Like, so no, I definitely think that there's other stuff out there. I think it's just too taboo, and I think it's too scary for the human mind to wrap around the fact that like there's probably aliens. A state that I find extremely interesting is Oregon, and actually my roommate is out there right now because they have like alien sightings all the time, and like cows will come up completely like decapitated or like a limb missing or something, and they tie it back to the fact that they think that it's aliens slowly taking one thing at a time from our Earth to try to figure out what we are. So I think that's also extremely interesting, but there's a lot of unknowns in that area as well, which is why it's so intriguing.
Mm-hmm.
I think with like looking at other planets, so I guess kind of rolling this back, science perspective, religious perspective, a little bit of both, right? So I think that before I say this, there's nothing that I have seen that's triggered my thought in the Bible necessarily where it says that like this is it, this is the be all end all, there's no other whatever. There's nothing that stood out to me. I have not done even a little bit of research into that though. So take that with a grain of salt to preface this conversation. But I very much think that like there's this reoccurring theme in the like Bible, which is supposed to be that as you have the capacity to learn more, God reveals more. That is a very strong theme in like Christianity. And most often it's taught within the realm of like, well, you start off teaching kids this, but then as they get older, you're like, well, you know, so you look at like some churches that are around that like, you love everyone. And then you've got like these crappy churches that are like, well, like society now, but look at that from like a, so I think if you have this theme, which is that God reveals when you're ready and when you can process that information, I find it very hard to believe that like you can look at the Bible and be like, this is it, this is the be all end all, there's nothing more we're going to learn. I have kind of a hard time believing that. And so I think when we pull it into the perspective of looking at the universe, we know it's infinite. We know why there's life on Earth and all of these things. We know that we're beginning to see this in other planets, whether it's like with the water or whatever. I don't know if I necessarily believe that we like absolutely know about other life at this point. Maybe, I don't know. But I think that the idea that there's other life out there, knowing how big like the universe is and our galaxy is just our galaxy, and it's like, yes, while the conditions had to be exactly right for like our galaxy to exist and Earth to exist and our solar system to exist, and I understand that, I think when you talk about an infinite universe, I have a really hard time believing that we can have this like infinite universe and there's no other situations where things have lined up perfectly, you know? And so I very much think, I don't think that like religion overall is mutually exclusive from this idea of alternate life. I think that quite frankly, it fits into the doctrine where we know that God reveals himself as you're ready for more. And I think that that could very much fit into this narrative of like, if there's other life out there, which like if we have this infinite universe and all of these other galaxies, I kind of feel like there has to be something, you know?
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm. So.
Yeah, I like that. And I would say like life beyond Earth is something that I really have not thought about, because it's one of those things that's like, that scares me and I am not going to think about it. But I personally like, I don't believe in aliens, but like, do I think like there are, I don't know how many off the top of my head planets like within our solar system? There has to be something out there, something of some sort. It has to be like different plants, like, you know, the water stuff. Like there has to be like some things like out there. And so like I do believe that. And I think that Josie also brought up a good point about like God is going to reveal different things as like when we're ready for it and when that happens. So like, I mean, right now, like we're trying to figure out, can you live on Mars? Can people live on Mars? And so like we're learning that kind of stuff. And this is a time where we have advanced ourselves so much in technology and just in modern day world that this is a time where God is showing us like there are these different outlets and things that I want you to see, kind of things, and that are like out there and stuff. So kind of like, you know, religious aspect to also that. Yeah, I would definitely overall say I feel like there has to be something going on within those planets that we see, unless, you know, they're like Mercury and stuff like that. And like, I don't really see anything being on there because that's just like, you know, too hot, a lot of stuff. But like, I mean, if it's a livable situation, then there has to be something there, right? So, yeah.
I feel like we could easily transition into conspiracy theories right now. But we'll save that for another episode. But I feel like we could so easily.
Next episode, I call dibs on the Denver airport.
That is a good one.
That is a good one.
Well,
This whole
I
time
have
I
a
was thinking about the
question.
moon because I was like, did we actually land on the moon? Do we actually know there's Mars? Like my brain was just
Girl.
spiraling.
We're gonna spiral down these theories so quick.
We could talk.
That's true. Well,
Oh,
I
I
love a
I
good
have a
conspiracy
question.
theory.
But I have a question, and something that I struggle with a lot. And I mean, this goes from like a religious aspect to also a just like being spiritual and just like honestly just your opinions. Like something I struggle with is how everything began. Like there is a beginning to everything. What was the beginning of how everything came to be? Like I mean, I understand, like I believe that like God's been here forever, but like how long is forever? Like was there like a beginning before that? Like kind of thing, you know? So I guess I just want to know like what's your guys' opinions about that? Because it's something that I'm just like it's hard for me to wrap my head around.
Well, I'll give mine because I think it's short and sweet and not at all religious. I do, since I believe wholeheartedly in the idea of God not being an integral part in the creation of our earth and the creation of life on earth, because I think that organisms just continue to evolve from little creatures that were near water sources into whole things, and we've had an infinite amount of time to get from that point to where we are as a humanity, and that's plenty of time for us to progress. That's kind of my thing. I think the vaster question of how the universe was created is beyond any knowledge base that I as a person have, so I don't really have an answer for it. But for planet Earth, I just believe in the evolutionary process of we've just had so much time to go from little organisms that slowly adapt to our environment into human beings. So it's a good question though.
I know. I'm like, my gears
Asking
are
the deep
turning.
stuff.
Yeah, I know. Like I've been meaning to have a conversation with my grandma about it because I'm like, this is something since I was like little that I was like, I just don't understand that. Like I can't wrap my head around that.
For me, it's hard because like, do I believe that God is a higher power? Yes, but do I believe that he's the highest power? I think if he's able to be that strong and create all of this, then like I said, the universe can be that strong or something else can be that strong. So it's hard for me to think that he was so strong that like the universe was already here and then God appeared and now here we are. Because I also believe that then God had to come from something. So that's hard. That's hard. That's my thoughts. I don't really have an answer. That's just my open thought.
Yeah. I'm interested to know Josie's take.
I think we don't have any idea. I think like the short and the end of it, terrified and comforted by all of the things that don't make sense. Because there's part of this idea of, I consider myself a decently smart person. And I think that this idea that, and this is following like the religious mindset, is that there is something out there. And this is even if it's not God, if it's like Colleen kind of hit on, like if you think it's something else, whatever, but this idea that there is something else out there that is so much bigger than what I can even begin to comprehend and question scares me, but I'm very comforted by it. Where I'm like, I don't know. I don't even know how to begin to answer that question. And I think that I find like solace in that there's something more out there and there's something smarter and there's something bigger. And if God is just like using me to make this incredibly insubstantial, whatever, like speck blip on the radar, because the universe and everything else is so huge and infinite, I've learned I have to be okay with that. And I think that's mostly from the fact that like I'm not good at not knowing things. As you very well know about me, is that I'm an absolute control freak. And I think that that was one of the things in my like religious journey, was learning, like surrendering some things that I'm just never going to know. And I kind of put that in that category. It's
I was just
scary.
interested to know. Yeah. We're in a simulation. That's the answer. No, I'm just kidding.
Nothing's real. Nothing's real.
Well,
But,
I was
I was just interested.
Yeah, and I was gonna open that up into like, so yeah, we've talked a lot about religion, we've talked a lot about the universe, about all these higher things. Do you guys find it so hard to figure out what your purpose is and all of that? And like, I always think about, why was I born now? Why am I in this generation? Am I supposed, like, why was I supposed to be born at this time? Why wasn't I born in the 1800s? Why wasn't I born in 2050? You know, I feel as if I am in this time frame for a reason. And I find it so difficult within all of this stuff to figure out, okay, so what is my tiny little piece? What is my puzzle piece in this whole realm?
That's a good question.
Not really, I guess, kind of a question, but
Who wants to hit that first? I'm still processing.
I'm still
Processing the
processing.
same thing.
Well, like, to me, like, let me elaborate a little bit more. You know, I've boiled it down to, okay, I'm very passionate for writing. I'm very passionate for speaking. I'm very passionate about being a journalist. So where I'm at right now is, I feel as if my purpose is to inform the people. That's where I feel like I am at. That might be different when I'm 30. That might be different when I'm 40. But it calms my mind to know that, like, okay, this is the path I've chosen. This is the path I think that's right for me. This is the path I think I will excel in. This is what I'm doing. Hopefully it's right.
I guess, like, I come at it with more of a like a religious approach with it. Is God and so he is all knowing, and so therefore he knew when to put you here was going to benefit and help you grow, but also for you to impact on those around you. And those kind of people that you're surrounded by right now are the people that you're going to be able to have lasting impact on. And so for your personal journey, that's where it's at. But also, I think that we're supposed to be living like this and trying to figure out what our purpose is. And so I think that it's just like a big growing aspect, but also like a learning aspect of, I mean, for me, I don't know what my purpose is, but I hope and believe that I will find that someday to know. But I think that we're all here and put here at a specific time, and one day we're going to find out what that meaning was and why we are put here. But also there's a lot of life lessons and like journeys that we're going to have along the way, and you're put here because, I mean, some people, like, you hear people say like, he's an old soul. Sure, that's true, but they were put here for a reason, because maybe they wanted somebody like within that community to have those kind of thoughts and beliefs and way of going about themselves to be able to equal out things and that kind of stuff. So I think that it's just, everything's here for a reason. It happened for a reason. Well, kind of like what I said, God's all knowing, and he knew when was right and when was wrong time for somebody to be placed on this earth with those that are around them.
Josie looks overwhelmed.
Rachel,
I was hoping that you'd go next. I don't know, honestly. That's like my answer, is that I don't know. I honestly haven't thought much about it. I know that it doesn't keep me up at night. It doesn't keep me from, like, I'm moving forward in my life. I don't know. I don't really know what my purpose is. I think part of, for me, is that, like, as much as I love my life right now, I still sometimes feel like I should just be doing completely different things. Like, I love my job, but like, I know in my soul that it does me in a way that like probably doing something else does. So yeah, I genuinely don't know. But again, I haven't really put much of any thought into it. I don't know. I guess I'll have to think on it and we'll let you know. Back for conspiracy theories with an update from all of us.
Yeah.
Exactly.
But like,
Yeah.
also, I can sit here and think about it, and like, I feel like I could tell you what I think that Rachel's purpose is to be here. Like,
fair.
she's a joyous soul that genuinely cares a lot about people, and so therefore she's here because the world sucks right now, and so we need people like Rachel to be able to go on and to have some sort of faith in humanity, because she's just an amazing person. And I can also tell you like things for Josie and for Colleen. So that's like what I mean by like also what I said. So also Rachel, you're kind of my point. I'm not saying that I'm correct, but like I'm saying that like that's how I'm seeing it.
It was very sweet. Thank you. It was very, very kind.
Welcome.
I liked it a lot. Made me feel good. Get me right in the feel
Give
good.
me some more.
Very
don't be shy. Add a little more.
Don't be shy. Put some more.
Well, I guess my follow-up
think-
question would be, and Josie, I'll let you answer because
You're
I got
good.
to answer both. Are you okay with never knowing your purpose? Chris.
I was just getting ready to answer, and now you put that in the universe, and now what am I supposed to do? What am I supposed to do with that, Colleen?
Sorry.
I guess for me, to go back to the original thing, like, what's your purpose in life? I feel very much like the older I get, I think I've gone through a lot of phases of things I thought were my purpose. And I don't think that's a bad thing. I think that as you like navigate these different times in your life, you're going to be called to different things at different times. You can make a monumental impact in these very, very different things. Like, I interned at a church camp one summer and one college. Did I love it? Did I feel like at certain times I made a substantial difference and I was there for a reason? Sure. And I kind of think that, you know, whatever the role we're in, we do those things. And so it sounds cliche, but I go back to the old saying of like, you do what you can with what you have, where you're at. Good old WLC from high school. Thank you, SSA.
Oh, Lord.
I hate.
I was like, why am I getting PTSD?
I know. But I do think, that there's a reason though it comes back to that. And that's because I think that at any given point, and this is where I kind of feel myself, is like, I am a very inconsequential person. There is nothing about me that's probably ever going to make a big difference in anyone's life or in the career field or in the world or whatever. And that's okay. Not okay. I will lose a lot of sleep over that in my life. And I have, because I think all of us want to be what like the world considers great, right? But at the end of the day, I think, and I fail more often than not at this, but it's like, if I can do some little tiny thing in the role that I'm in during that day, I kind of feel like that's all of our purpose from a really fundamental standpoint. It's like, I could talk about my purpose. It's like, I very much feel like I'm supposed to be working in the policy space and in politics and things like that. Could not suck more. Could not freaking suck more. Man, can you imagine it being the year 2021? You're like, yeah, I'm going to work in politics. It is horrible. But with all that being said, I also feel like if everyone, whoever looked at that industry and was like, no way, goodbye, it's never going to get better. And so I could talk about it from that perspective, but really I think my fundamental thing is like, I hope that at the end of the day, somebody's life, not even somebody's life, somebody's day, their 24 hours is like a little bit better because of some interaction they have with me, but just being kind or doing things like that. And I think that that's bringing it back to the religious perspective. When we really boil it down to like what we're called to do, like if you believe, again, from the Christian faith, but I think this goes really across the board with most, it's just like, be a good person, you know? And so that's what I feel like at the end of the day, if I can put my head on my pillow at night and know that I worked hard at my job today, and even though I was really, really, really upset with that like meeting request that someone took forever to get through and was mean to me about, I responded with kindness and empathy, and I did those things and I made good use of my time, and I was, you know, at the end of the day, a decent person. I think that's kind of all I have going for me, is to be like slightly better than average, hopefully. And that's just because average is really low. But I think that that's kind of where I'm at. And I hope that someday, you know, I get struck by a bolt of lightning. I'm like, oh my God, I'm here to cure cancer. Plot twist, guys. I'm going back to school. I'm getting my medical degree. This is what I'm supposed to do. And this is my calling. This is my purpose and that. I don't think I'm ever going to have that. But I do think that my purpose is just to not be shitty.
Fair enough.
It's fair.
Yeah.
I also want you to know that you've made a lasting impact on me. So
Same. I was thinking that too. I was like, shut up, girl. You've done so
I know.
much.
I was like, shut up, Josie. You know how many times we've played that one game and it's like, who is most likely to have a monument named after them? And you win every single time.
They're like, the big dumb dummy award.
Oh, not true, but
I think that's what's so beautiful about our generation too, is I think like our parents' generation, they had like one purpose, one thing. And I feel like with our generation that we're like tackling so many different things, especially for how work driven we are. And I think we're doing a better job at being more life driven as well. So yeah, like I think your 20s could have one purpose, your 30s have another, and your 40s you cure cancer. Like I definitely think that you can have multiple purposes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm so hopeful. I know that like in the world we live in right now, I think that's really hard, but it's like with all of the mess that we live in right now, with whether it's politically or socially or environmentally or all of these different things, I think that there's a whole lot of really, really bad, and there's going to always be a whole lot of really bad stuff in the world, but I'm incredibly hopeful for our generation that even if things are only better by 1%, if things are better by 1% in every generation, then okay, we'll take that. And I'm hopeful that those things will come to fruition for us. And I don't know,
Yeah.
it makes me optimistic.
Yeah. Well, I'm going to plug myself a little bit, but it's my podcast. That was one reason. That was one reason why I wrote the book. I contemplated back and forth so long on writing a book, especially on my mental health journey and other people's mental health journey. That's something that's so vulnerable and so raw and something that's not still totally accepted. But then I sat down and I was like, you know what? If one person reads this and relates, or one person reads it and follows my advice or somebody else's advice in the book, then I will be a proud author. And I think that's something that you can, and I think that's something that you can, I mean, with every area of your life, like you said, I mean, if you impact one person, then that's enough.
it makes it all the difference, and it's important.
It's crazy all the topics we just covered in this podcast, guys.
I'm like,
beautiful.
I feel like we could talk for another 3 hours.
I know. No, I feel like that's a good note to end on. We've been recording for 2 hours now, so if we didn't answer your questions,
Colleen, you don't want to sift through like 9 hours of footage and audio?
I mean, I am the one that has to edit this, so I have
Good
my
luck,
notepad.
Charlie.
Yes. No, I think that's a great place.
Well,
to end this.
No, that was really beautiful what you all said. I think a good purpose for anyone is to have a hopeful, better world of what we have.
I
be
guess
nice.
like before we sign off, does anyone have any final thoughts that they'd like to give? For me, I just want to appreciate, or well, tell you all that I appreciate you all. And I loved that we were able to have a completely open-minded, safe space for all of us to share all of our thoughts, opinions, beliefs, and that I think that it was really awesome, and that I appreciate and love all three of you. I'm glad that you're in my life, and I'm very glad that you guys were able to join Colleen and I on our podcast. And I really hope that some of our listeners really have taken and latched onto something, and it has helped them, whether that's in their spiritual journey, their religious journey, their thoughts of confusion and trying to understand how life came to be and all of that. So thank you. I appreciate you.
Yeah. I was about to say, I think that to go off of that as a final thought, I think this was the start of a really good conversation. I think these are the conversations our generation needs to be having, and quite frankly, easy for us because we're all kind of, placed in a lot of the same categories. And I think that there's so much nuance that goes into these conversations that, this is just the start, and, bringing in different people from different backgrounds and all of these different things, I'm just hopeful that as we continue to have these types of conversations, we can bring in, these other marginalized groups and different. It's really easy for us to talk about Christianity and not being a believer. And so I think that that's an important conduit to having conversations about these religions that are marginalized in our world. And I think that all of these conversations are so important. So I'm excited that this is just kind of like a springboard for what's to come for this podcast and for just who we are as people.
I feel like we could have our own podcast on everything that we just talked about.
Yeah, they do. They're a thing.
Down the rabbit hole on it. Yeah, I was going to say the same thing that's kind of already been said. Just thank you guys for letting me be a part of it and having this conversation. I think it was really productive and a good topic to cover in all of its areas. I think we have a good group of people with different opinions and views, and it's always nice to hear and see those. So yeah, just really thanks. Really appreciate it. We'll see you again for conspiracy theories. I'm just kidding. I don't make those executive decisions around here.
Chris and I'll talk after. Now, I was gonna say, take it from us, the four of us, that we can all have completely different mindsets and different opinions. No one argued. No one raised their voice. No one said your opinion's wrong. We're just be able to reach out, to branch out of your comfort zone and create friendships with people that are different than you, because your gears are going to be turning like ours are. And I really hope that you can have that open mindset that we have to be able to, I don't understand that, but I want to. So I appreciate you guys for having an open mindset, for being on today, for sitting here for almost 2.5 hours. So yeah, like Chris said, we're so happy that you were here, and I'm happy that you're in my lives as well. And I'm sure that we will have you back at some point.
Good talk, guys.
Okay.
Yeah. Very good time.
Well,
woo!
Yeah. Well, the last thing that we do every time before we sign off is...
Chris, this is perfect for this episode.
Why? Oh, peace and blessings. However you feel that goes. Yeah.
Really, no, that's a good peace and blessings for whatever that means for you.
Yep.
Are we saying it all at the same time?
We're gonna say it together.
Okay.
So
okay.
Go 3, 2, 1.
Peace and
blessings.
I said it way before everyone else.